St Kilda's top 8 chances are back on after a win to the Lions.
Port Adelaide still can't beat a top 8 side.
And West Coast lose at home to the Wooden Spooners to make their season go from horrendous to absolutely embarrassing. This is the DrewFooty Show.
Long road, took a tumble down this black hole. Stuck in Sunday league, but I'm on level.
Hello, you flonkers, and welcome back to another episode of the DrewFooty Show. We're spicing it up this week. Jesse didn't want to come on the show after his side has lost to the bottom of the table. He's done a runner, so I've had to downgrade to Caden MacDonald. So take your chance, mate. You're in the spotlight now, so make of it what you will. How are you?
Oh, Drewsendorf, thanks for having me. Yeah, it was a bit upsetting to see Jesse just not wanting to compete after that performance by the West Coast Eagles, but I've stepped in. You have to go to someone who's on top of the ladder because the morale's high. Your team's come off a win, my team's come off a win, so happy days on the DrewFooty Show.
Winners only, winners only. But nah, for real, I didn't have time to film this morning after my horrific loss last night, England going down in the Euros final to Italy. And woke up late, filmed just the tips, and I had to bounce. So I'm filming it late, and thank God we are, because we've just watched one of the great games of football. We'll get onto that, but make sure you guys are following the DrewFooty _ account on Instagram to make sure you're involved in the show every week. Watch the Instagram stories, tap the sticker, and that's how you get involved in the show. Anyway, let's get on with it. Straight into the winners and losers this week, MacDonald, and I can't believe it, but St Kilda have revived their season. After having such a slow start and some shocking, gutless performances, they've just started stringing results together somehow, MacDonald. I don't understand it. Jack Steele with another massive game, 32 touches, 2 goals in that last quarter. One of the best quarters of the season by any individual player in that fourth term. But how have they gone and beat one of the most informed sides in the comp in Brisbane? What do you make of the Saints? Because I don't know where to go with them.
I feel like they're subtly building quite nicely, and it's crept up on me a little bit. Like that result against the Tigers really set their season alight. They were a little bit unconvincing against the Pies, but to go up, I know it wasn't the Gabba, it was on Metricon, so to go up to the Gold Coast and versus the Queensland side and get over the line, I thought was super impressive. So I feel like with the results that are happening, there will be a spot for them if they can take it to make the 8, which I wouldn't have said a long time ago. I think potentially their percentage is absolutely woeful, and that might be the only thing that counts them out. But the Saints are up and about.
They've got 86.9%, and their next 5, they've got Port, so that's a winnable game for them.
Yep.
They've got West Coast. Anyone can beat West Coast at the moment. They've got Carlton, that's a winnable game, Sydney and Geelong. So they've got big games coming up. But they're playing like that. Well, on that last performance against Brisbane, they're playing like they were last year. So if they can find that form, they're every chance of making the 8 up into 9th. So good on them. Winners of the week this week. We've got a question here from Zach Batossa, 44. What a name. He says, did the Saints have turbo lag for the first half of the season? You know when you're playing AFL Evo and you're like on the half-back flank and it just lags a little bit. Next minute, you're in the forward pocket. Maybe the Saints just have a bit of that. Just, they can't win any games, dropping results left, right and centre, and then bang, beat the Lions. Turbo lag.
Yeah, I think they had a big case of it. If they make the finals from where they were halfway through the season, it will be one of the all-time great stories. So the chance is there, and telling weeks over the next couple of weeks for the Saints.
But yeah, for Brisbane, a bit of a blip in the radar. I think they played pretty decent, but the Saints just matched it. The main story from this game, unfortunately, was Eric Kipwood. He's done his ACL. So that's going to be a massive blow to their final shot, or their premiership chances even. Devastating to see such a good player go down with such a devastating injury. Probably won't see him for another 12 months.
Yeah, that's the second ACL they've had on that ground this season. Cam Rayner did it up at Metricon in the preseason as well. So they probably don't want to be playing too many more games at Metricon Stadium. But yeah, really unfortunate incident. And it's going to really change some stuff in their forward line. Their sort of marquee forward line was those 3 or 2 talls in particular. The 2 who were over 200 centimetres in Danaher and Hipwood. So it'll change a few things. McStay is probably going to have to play a bit of a bigger role, and it's going to be interesting going into finals for the Lions.
The other winners of the week, MacDonald, I'm going to give it to the Sydney Swans. They pumped West Coast last week. Not that that's a big feat. Anyone can do that. But they go up to Marvel. They're locked out of their home state. They play the Bulldogs, and they play a 4-quarter effort. They led this game for the last 3 quarters. and they are just looking like one of the best sides in the comp at the moment. We were chatting earlier today. What do you make of the Swans compared to all these other top 8 sides?
Geez, they worry me personally as a D supporter. Whenever we verse them, the matchup is really, really close. And out of all the teams we played this year, the Swans have been one of the most dangerous that we played in particular. But then they've also knocked off the Cats. They've knocked off the
Brisbane.
Bulldogs. Brisbane, and then they got really close to Port Adelaide at Adelaide Oval. If it wasn't for Scotty Lysette, they potentially have another scalp there. So they are as competitive as anyone else in the top 4 or 5. And it was one of those results that if I was a tipper, I'd probably would have tipped the Swans. It just had that feel to it. The Bulldogs on their home deck are not usually a vulnerable bunch, but the Swans got the job done and they were pretty exciting.
They never rebuild the Swans. They had a couple, 1 or 2 years out of the 8 and they're just right back into it. They've been into 5 grand finals in my lifetime. Only 2 of them, but they just know what it takes to stay right up there with such a young list as well. Unreal.
Yeah, they've hacked the system. I think their academy does bits and pieces for them, but geez, credit to them.
So the Bulldogs losing does you boys a favour at Deesland, puts you guys a game clear on top, drops them to second, level on points with the Cats. Ugle-Hagan debuted. Everyone was very hyped for it, but he just couldn't find a rhythm. Probably not the best game to chuck him in against the red-hot Sydney Swans. I think he's going to get dropped next week when Norton comes back in. And the Dogs get Dunkley back next week as well. So that's going to be huge for them, just to bolster up that midfield if it wasn't already OP enough.
Yeah, well, and also they got Treloar and maybe a couple of other names starting to come back. So a little bit of a mulligan for them. They get a bit of a pass. It's not danger signs by any means, but
No.
you want to keep banking those wins home deck going late into the season because it is tight from 1st to 5th and from 7th to 12th. It is on for young and old. So you just want to keep ticking over the 4 points each week, even though you are in a good position being in the top 2.
On to the losers of the week, MacDonald. Mwap, mwap, mwah, 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 mwah. You're meant to do it. That's alright. So I've gone to the Friday night game, Essendon versus Adelaide at Marvel. I streamed this game and it was an absolute shocker. So we're not going to talk too much about the game. But Adelaide get losers of the week this week. Not because I expected them to win this game, but it was their lowest ever score. And it was no text, no party. Thorpe got fingered in that forward line. They kicked 2 goals for the night. They could have been put to the sword if Essendon kick straight. Could have been an absolute pumping. The bright spark and a player that I know you love, MacDonald, is Archie Perkins. He had 3 goals and 18 touches. He's looking like a real star for the future. What do you make of him?
He is a star. He probably finally gets his Rising Star nom this week. He's been super impressive and just adds to that nice young crop that the Bombers have introduced this year. I want to get your thoughts on the Tom Doedee collision, running back with the flight, cleaned up.
That was just stupid. It was ridiculous.
What do you think of that?
He was never going to make that. He was never going to do it. That's just going back with the flight with absolutely no intent. He put his heart on his sleeve, but there was just absolutely no need at all. Tipper just cleans him up, gets subbed off. It's just stupid, isn't it?
That is the risk you take with those sort of running back with the flight. Sometimes they do look a little bit unnecessary, and sometimes they're desperate and they're sort of match saving. So, but then again, if he pulls out of that, he'd be the meme of the week on the DrewFooty Show as well. So it's a tough one, but yeah, a real act of bravery, and hopefully the young fella's okay.
Now, losers of the week wouldn't be complete without talking about West Coast, MacDonald.
Wow.
They got pumped on their home deck by the Bulldogs a few weeks ago. They go over to GMHBA and get absolutely belted by Sydney by 92 points. They go home fixture to the bottom of the ladder. I mean, if there's any game that's going to play you into form, it's that. They go down by 10 points to the bottom of the ladder, North Melbourne Kangas. I mean, North Melbourne have been playing in good form, but I'm not letting you off the chain here, West Coast. You're getting losers of the week. We'll start off with North Melbourne. Jaden Stevenson played his best game in the blue and white. One of the best games of his career. 38 touches. He's finally been let off the chain at North Melbourne, getting the games, and he's playing in real good form. 38 touches and a really important goal in that last quarter. Cam Zohar playing with a great intensity. North Melbourne just played with a lot of heart in this game. Nick Larkey as well. Unreal. I thought in that last quarter when Eagles kicked 4 straight, I was like, nah, Eagles are just going to find a way here. But they just run out of gas. And North Melbourne got the job done. So before we move on to the losers, let's talk about the winners. What do you make of the Kangas?
I got a message sort of start of the year, maybe the first 6 or 7 rounds, and it was a North fan, and he goes, I'm absolutely gutted because we're not going to win a game all season. And I replied to him going, well, look, I've watched one of the worst teams in the last 15 years, and even we managed to win 1 or 2. So you're going to win a couple of games. They've over-exceeded expectations, I reckon. They've pinched a couple of wins, one against the Hawks, and who was their first one? Was it the Hawks and then the Suns? And then they come over to West Coast, and that's one of the hardest road trips in footy, despite where the West Coast Eagles are at. And they get the job done, and yeah, it was just really, really impressive. Jaden Stevenson was super impressive. And then, obviously, Zerha kicking 2-6. He could have had an absolute day out at the office. Yeah. Super impressive and probably their best, well, by far their best win of the season.
Yeah, for sure. Now, West Coast. It can't get much worse. It can't get much worse. And I am loving it. I just wanted to say this game was capped off. I live semi-close to Optus. And as soon as the final siren went, it started absolutely bucketing it down. Yep. There was lightning, thunder. I would have paid money to see the West Coast fans walk out of Optus and just getting absolutely drenched. Yes. I reckon the rain made up for the tears that were falling out of their eyes. It was a direct correlation, and it just makes me filled with joy, MacDonald. I messaged Jesse, so I'll tell you what he has to make of it. He couldn't make the show today, obviously, being too butthurt, but I'll tell you what he said anyway. He says, it's hard to believe that it's getting worse every week. He didn't end up going to the game, actually. He pulled out last minute. He's called them weak CUN. You can make up the rest. There's no other way to put it. Drop Darling, drop McGovern, drop Sheed, drop Ryan. I mean, it is panic stations at West Coast. They dropped to 8. Freo are above West Coast on the ladder. Who would have predicted that?
Yeah, well, they got teams hot on their tail as well. I think they would be very nervous going to the last 6 rounds. I don't really think they deserve to make the top 8. Potentially their run home is their saving grace, but they're getting players back, and it's just a catch-up season for them. They had injuries all season, and it sort of seemed like one of those ones where if they get players back, it'll all click, but there's just no cohesion. They are just really, really struggling at the moment, and geez, I really don't know where they go from here, to be honest.
It's gone from bad to worse to horrendous to absolutely embarrassing. You're a bunch of mugs. Dockers forever. You're a bunch of mugs. Alright, there's the winners and losers of the week. So, we just move on to the games now, MacDonald. And a game that you went to. You took the trip from Geelong to Adelaide. There's no point me talking about this game because you were there. I forgot to put my tip in, but I would have... That just sounds a bit mad. But if I did, it would have gone into Cozzy Pickett. No. But no, Cozzy was unreal. 3 goals I think he had, and 2 of them just off a step from about 45 plus, flying through the goals. Petrarca was back in form. Ben Brown back into the side, definitely freed up Tom MacDonald to get off the chain as well. What'd you make of your Ds? A season-defining win almost after losing to the Giants. Needed a response, and what a huge response it was.
Yeah, no, you put it perfectly. There was backs against the wall. We've had a pretty lame month, to be honest. The Pies result wasn't very good, and then the Essendon win wasn't very convincing, and then obviously we dropped the game against the Giants. So there was a little bit of nerves, and you start to sort of, the thoughts start playing in your mind. What if we don't win many more for the rest of the season? What if the cliff has arrived? It was real nervous all week. There was a lot of chatter how we could finish the round in 5th and how Port could jump up. And it was a must-win result. It felt like a finals-type atmosphere. So I hopped in the car, headed across the border, and they got the job done. It was really, really impressive. Tom MacDonald was great. Petrarca kicked 3. Tommy Mack kicked 3. Cozzy kicked 3. Clayton Oliver was massive through the middle. And, season-defining win. And it sort of puts that little bit of faith back in to the Melbourne supporters going in for the rest of the season.
We've got a question here, MacDonald, from Basketball Aiden 273. And he asks, are the Power the pretenders of the AFL? It's a term that's been thrown around the Power all season. Adelaide, the losers of this week, have been more competitive in the top 8, beating Geelong. Who else am I forgetting? They've beaten Geelong, Melbourne. So they've been more competitive in the 8. Are Power pretenders?
I think on a esteemed football podcast about probably around 7 or 8, Connor Rogers and myself chucked up the sort of pretender-ish tag, and it was off the back of results to West Coast and Brisbane away, but they'd beaten the Tigers at the time at home, and since then they just have struggled with that top 4 side. And probably the most disappointing results have been the Bulldogs game and then the Geelong game. And then if you were going to stand up, it was going to have to be against an out-of-form D's, and they just couldn't. It gives you really little faith going into the rest of the season as a Port fan that they can go all the way. I think they can definitely pinch a final or two, but it's just hard to look at them now and go, yeah, they're a real threat. But what are your thoughts on them?
They just can't play four quarters, Port Adelaide, for whatever reason. I can't remember seeing them put up a four-quarter effort this season, obviously not against a top 8 side. They'll write themselves out of a game almost. They'll be sort of 4 goals down, and then they'll just have a power surge, if you will. They'll come back into it, maybe kick 2 or 3. But then after that, it's like, they're not going to offer too much else. Maybe that Sydney game was a good example. So they have beaten a top 8 sider. So that Sydney game was the only real example where they dug deep and got a win late. But I remember against Geelong, they sort of had a late surge and then couldn't hold on to that intensity that they created. Same against the Bulldogs, and now against the D's. They just run out of gas, the power.
Yeah, and there's a lot of question marks, and you don't really want question marks going into this late in the season. You want to start answering those questions, and they haven't yet. There's still a long 6 weeks to go. There's upsets galore. There's going to be upsets galore to continue. So I think if they get their shit together, there could be an opening in the top 4. But it's getting harder and harder, and you don't want to leave it any longer because you get the feeling the Cats are going to start winning. You get the feeling that the Lions are going to start ticking them over. Well,
the Lions could start to slip up with that loss to St Kilda. Maybe that's where the opening could be.
That could be the opening, but it's up to Port Adelaide to just control what they can control and get the wins themselves, which they've been struggling to do. So really telling last 6 weeks for a lot of the sides in the top 4.
Saturday morning, Freo versus Hawthorn. A 62-point win from the Dockers on Fife's 200th. And what a game it was from an absolute legend of the game. Such a good performance from Fifey. Our mids dominated all game. Sarong had 30 touches. Brayshaw was massive. Chera, decent. Mundy was huge. Sean Darcy, I'm telling you right now, if he doesn't get an All-Australian ruckman spot this season, he's been robbed. Because he has been a top 3 easy ruckman this year. Arguably top 2. Who's been better than him? Gorney? Maybe?
Yeah, I'd probably say Gorney, yeah.
But yeah, Grundy has been pretty hot and cold and in and out of the side with injury. I mean, Darcy has emerged as one of the best ruckmen in the comp this season.
Yeah, no, he has. Jeez, the Freo Dockers are starting to tick over those wins, which are so important. What's the run home look like for the Dockers? Because they are well and truly in the finals hunt.
It is a hard run home. I'll get that up right now. So we're into 7th. So we are in pole position now. Like, it's just up to us to get the wins. We've got Geelong at home this week, a fixture we won 2 years ago when we were absolutely terrible. Yep. So I'm going into that game optimistic that we can get the job done. The week after we have Sydney in red hot form, Richmond at home, winnable, Brisbane at home, West Coast at home, and anyone can beat West Coast. And then we got St Kilda away. The next 5 or 6 weeks for me, it is like the finals. Like I don't mind if we don't make the 8 because we're playing all these top 8 sides. We're gonna find out if we're worthy to be a top 8 side or not in the next 5 weeks. If we can get results and we end up in the 8, bloody wicked. If we lose these games, though, it shows that we're not a top 8 side, and obviously we're not primed for a premiership run yet. No harm in not making the 8. Yeah, it's going to be really good to see how we compete with these sides like Brisbane, Geelong, Sydney, even St Kilda, because these are all 8-point games. But about the game anyway, I don't even think the best Freo side showed up. The midfield connection wasn't really there for most of the game. Hawthorn going forward had really nothing. They competed with us well. This wasn't Freo's best performance, even though it was our biggest winning margin of the season. I hate to sound like a Debbie Downer, but we didn't get out of third gear, to be honest. It was just a really poor performance from Hawthorn. We ended up just, putting it on the scoreboard, kicking straight for once, which was nice. If we played a top 8 side like that, we would have lost, to be honest. But we'll chalk up the 62-point win and we'll move on to Geelong Thursday night. Here's a block-busting clash for you, MacDonald. Carlton versus Geelong at the MCG. How good is Sam Walsh? Keeps on carrying Carlton to losses. 38 touches and 2 goals. Carlton couldn't kick straight. They got to aim for the big posts, not like the small ones. But yeah, expected result here. Geelong chalk up another 4 points. Any thoughts on this game?
Carlton had chances, if I'm going to be honest. I felt like they were well and truly within the game at half-time. The Cats are just a classy outfit, and they turned it on in the third, and they get going. Like, they can start just walking goals through. It's ridiculous. They walk it out in the middle and then just slot them. They did it against the Power. They've done it against, Essendon when they can just get like 3 or 4 goals in 5-6 minutes. It's ridiculous. But they were so impressive. Jeez, I'm really interested to watch Paddy Cripps at the minute. He was rucking, he was labouring, he was sore. I get the feeling he's got niggles, which it seems, and I think if he has a good preseason, he can beat the player that he was. He hasn't just lost his ability. But right now, Sam Walsh is doing that, and you just feel like if Paddy Cripps can match Sam Walsh and get back to his best, they are going to be such a dynamic midfield together, because the last 2 years it's just been Sam Walsh performing and Paddy Cripps just trying to get into games. But he was a little bit disappointing on the weekend. But yeah, we sort of expected this match. The Cats were just too classy for the Blues.
Yeah, Cripps got his quad strapped up. Against Freo, he kicked Brandon Walker, got his ankle strapped, and then he was kicking on his left for the rest of the game. He's definitely playing through injuries. That's what you want your captain doing.
He just signed a massive deal. He's one of the most important players on your list. Like, you shouldn't be chucking him. I know the Cats don't really have a big ominous ruckman, but you shouldn't be. He's worth too much to you to be chucking in like one of the most robust positions, I felt as well.
Yeah, but as we said, expected result, again, not enough contributors from Carlton. GWS versus Gold Coast MacDonald. I'm going to open this up with a comment from a Gold Coast fan. So Thank you to Jack DeCourcy, I think that's how you say your name, for sending this one in. He says, as a Giants fan, I'm so sick of our team being so inconsistent and so disappointing every time we play anyone who's beneath our level. Is it a coaching thing or a personnel thing? Absolutely not a personnel thing. They have one of the most stacked lists in the competition.
Yeah.
I mean, fingers have to start be pointed at Leon Cameron. They beat your boys last week on your home deck. And you were saying how impressed you were with the Giants. They go up to Ballarat, play the Suns, and they just can't get it done. And they've dropped games to Hawthorn and North Melbourne, and now Gold Coast, the 3 bottom sides in the competition just about. What have you made of GWS this season? Because I know you rated them last week when they beat your boys, but you can't be losing games to Gold Coast if you're going to consider yourself a serious side.
Giants were super impressive on the MCG a week ago. They were back to their best, it seemed, the way they moved the footy. All their stars delivered, your Whitfields and your Callys, and they just can't do it the following week. And there's no real excuse. The Gold Coast Suns were just way too good. They gritted their teeth late, and it's starting to become a bit of a question. Who's going to be the better side in the next few years, the Suns or the Giants? I still probably have my eggs in the Giants basket, but the Suns are starting to have a good back half of the season, which they haven't had in their entire existence. They're starting to string together wins late in the season, and that'll just build momentum into next year. So a ripping result for the Gold Coast Suns. I've
been very critical of Gold Coast on the DrewFooty Show. This is why. They've had big results in the last few weeks, and this is what I expect of them. No one would have picked them to beat Richmond or GWS, and they've done it 2 weeks running now, so huge result for them. This is what I expect from them. This is why I've been so critical of them, because the talent's there, but they've just been dropping too many games. Finally, getting some good results on the board, and shout out to Shuey Jew for turning the ship around. Wanted to say again, Toug Miller, another shout out. He has to be all Australian. Another 30 plus disposals game, 2 goals, 14 tackles.
Yeah, workhorse, absolute workhorse, up and down the ground. He's there in the defence. He's willing the ball forward at times. He's just such an integral part to that footy club, and he's sort of one of those blokes who had the talent but didn't leave. And I think they've got a few more of those with your Rouse and your Anderson. So if they can sort of keep those 20-year-olds together with a 25-year-old-ish Toug Miller, they're starting to build a nice little crop. So Toug Miller's been unbelievable, and he'll certainly be in the 40, if not the 22, in the All-Australian.
The last game off the round was Tigers versus Collingwood. Now, no one probably cares about this game, to be honest, but at the start of the season, it would have been a blockbuster. Robert Harvey gets his first win as the Collingwood coach, and De Goey back into form, which was good to see. Collingwood's midfield was ticking. I went to sleep early on in this game. The Tigers were up very comfortably. Woke up and the Pies are up. I couldn't believe it. It was like I was dreaming, because it meant that Freo were staying in the top 8. The Tigers are really missing their rucks. Soldo and Nankervis both out.
It's quite funny, the fall from grace. Like, this would have been a big Friday night game or Saturday night game. but it copped the 4-10 Sunday Arvo treatment, which is real dodgy areas, to be honest. But it's quite funny because the game lived up to it. It was an exciting contest, and the Tigers looked like they'd got a little bit of mojo back, but they fell away again. They did it against West Coast, and they've done it again here, where the Pies have gotten over the line, and it's exciting for the Pies because they still do have that young outfit. So to see them string wins together, as I said about a couple of teams, in this video, it's exciting to build momentum going into next year. So that's really impressive by the Pies. But the Tigers are shot. They are done.
Yes.
They will not make the 8.
They've lost their last 4. So West Coast, a game which they were in front. Who else? Saints, lowest score ever. Gold Coast. Those are 4 terrible results. The only side that's worse for than them is the West Coast Eagles. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of the DrewFooty Show. An absolute special extravaganza episode this week with the big man Caden MacDonald joining. So thank you very much, MacDonald. I appreciate it greatly because you literally saved the show this week. It probably wouldn't have gone ahead without you.
Always a pleasure, never a chore. I love the episodes and you've been smashing it all season. So keen to watch this one back tomorrow.
Lovely. Happy days. Go check out Caden MacDonald's channel. If you want a long, lengthy podcast, if you're not getting your fix here enough, go check out the Back Pocket Plugger podcast with Caden MacDonald and Connor Rogers out every Wednesday. It's the best podcast in AFL, so make sure you go check it out. Thanks for coming, MacDonald.
Thanks, Drews.